The studio lights burned bright, casting sharp beams across the Senate floor as if the entire nation's gaze had been funneled into this one moment. Cameras whirred, every lens locked on the two men seated opposite each other. Tim Scott leaned forward, his voice slicing through the murmurs. "You can't silence me, Denzel." He said it with a half-smile, the kind meant to sound confident, but laced with a dare. Denzel Washington didn't flinch. His eyes locked on Scott's like steel on steel, the kind of stare that doesn't just meet you, it weighs you, measures you, strips you down to the truth. For a long, breathless moment, Denzel didn't speak. He let the silence do the heavy lifting, let the audience lean forward in their seats. Viewers across the country, sitting in living rooms and crowded cafes, could feel it. That pause wasn't hesitation, it was preparation. Scott shifted in his chair, maybe realizing too late that he'd set the table for his own undoing. Then Denzel leaned toward the mic, his voice low but carrying the weight of a gavel. "Watch me." 3 words. That's all it took. The crowd in the gallery erupted, some in cheers, some in stunned disbelief. Producers in the control room scrambled, cutting between close-ups of Denzel's unshakable expression and Scott's flicker of doubt. Twitter exploded in real time, hashtags forming faster than the moderators could follow, #WatchMe, #DenzelOwnScott, #3-word knockout. Scott tried to recover, raising his voice over the noise, but it was too late. Those 3 words had already landed, not just in the room, but in the national conversation. And Denzel, he just sat back, letting the echo of his words do what no filibuster, no speech, no policy paper could do, leave an entire Senate hearing hanging in the air, waiting for what came next. The noise in the chamber didn't fade, it shifted. Whispers turned into a restless buzz, the kind that tells you the room is no longer neutral ground. Tim Scott straightened his back, forcing a laugh into the microphone. "Cute line, Denzel. But this is politics, not Hollywood." The words landed flat. The audience didn't laugh with him, they were waiting to see if Denzel would let that slide. He didn't. Slowly, he adjusted his chair, leaning in just enough for the mic to catch his next words with razor clarity. "Politics? That's rich, coming from a man who calls himself a leader but flinches when truth knocks on the door." Gasps rippled across the gallery. Scott blinked, gripping the edge of his desk. "Are you accusing me of?" he began. "I'm not accusing you of anything," Denzel cut in sharply. "I'm reminding you that the people out there," he pointed toward the cameras, "don't care about your speeches. They care about results. They care about the promises you've broken while telling them everything's fine." The camera caught Scott's jaw tightening. He tried to jump back in, but Denzel wasn't done. "You talk about silencing, Senator? No one's silencing you. The truth is just louder than your excuses." The audience erupted, not polite applause, but raw, unfiltered reaction. The kind of sound that shakes the air, where every cheer feels like a verdict. In the control room, a producer whispered, "We've lost the segment, this is the segment now." Scott reached for his notes, shuffling papers as if finding the right stat could pull him out of the hole. But the look in his eyes told the real story. He wasn't debating anymore, he was defending himself. And Denzel knew it. Scott's voice finally cracked through the air, louder than before, his polished calm gone. "You think you can come in here and lecture me on leadership? You don't know the first thing about serving this country." The words echoed off the chamber walls, but instead of intimidating, they sounded almost desperate. The cameras zoomed in, one on Scott's clenched jaw, another on Denzel's unflinching stare. Denzel didn't move for a moment. He let the silence hang there just long enough for everyone to feel it. Then, with the kind of slow precision that makes people lean forward, he spoke. "Serving your country isn't about protecting your seat, Senator. It's about protecting the people who put you there. And right now, the only thing you're protecting is your reputation." A low murmur swept the audience. Scott opened his mouth to fire back, but Denzel held up a hand. "You talk about service? I've buried friends who served. I've seen mothers cry over folded flags while politicians like you gave speeches about sacrifice you've never made. So, don't stand there and tell me I don't understand. Scott's eyes darted toward the cameras, realizing millions were watching this unfold live. His attempt to regain control was shaky. This isn't about me. No, Senator, Denzel cut in, his voice sharp, this is about you pretending it's not about you. The crowd erupted, some standing to applaud, others just staring wide-eyed at the exchange. In the control booth, the producers knew, this clip wasn't just going viral, it was about to dominate headlines. Scott shuffled his papers again, but this time his hands trembled. He had walked into this hearing expecting to win with practiced lines. But against Denzel, every line was being dismantled, brick by brick. Scott leaned forward now, his voice dropping into that dangerous tone politicians use when they want to make it personal. You're an actor, Washington. You make your living pretending. This isn't a movie, and you don't get to play the hero here. The jab was meant to sting. A few people in the room gasped, and the camera caught one aide smirking behind Scott's shoulder. But Denzel didn't flinch. He leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and let out the kind of low chuckle that's not about humor, it's about disbelief. Pretending? Denzel repeated, his voice steady but cutting. The difference between me and you, Senator, is I know when I'm acting. You've been playing a role for so long, you've forgotten it's an act. The audience murmured louder, a mix of shock and approval. Scott's face tightened, a vein in his temple visibly pulsing. He tried to push back. You're here for attention. I'm here because you don't listen unless the lights are on, Denzel interrupted, pointing directly at Scott. His finger didn't just point, it accused. You've built a career on speeches about unity, but when the cameras are off, you vote to divide. And you know it. The words landed like a punch. Scott's jaw locked, but the flicker in his eyes betrayed him. Denzel had hit the truth, and everyone knew it. For a brief moment, there was silence. Even the shuffling of papers stopped. The only sound was the faint buzz of the overhead lights, and the realization that this was no longer just a Senate hearing, it was an unmasking. Denzel leaned forward now, closing the space between them. His voice dropped to a near whisper, but the microphones caught every word. You wanted a soundbite, Senator? Here it is, stop acting like a leader and start being one. The crowd erupted again, louder this time, and Scott, for the first time that day, looked like a man who wished the cameras weren't rolling. Scott's composure finally cracked. He slammed his palm on the desk so hard the microphones popped. You don't get to lecture me about leadership, he barked, his voice rising enough to make the sound tech flinch. I've served this country in ways you couldn't imagine. I've fought for the people. Denzel didn't move. He let Scott's voice bounce around the room, filling the air with bluster. Then, slowly, almost too casually, he reached into the folder in front of him and slid out a single sheet of paper. The sound of it dragging across the wooden desk was louder than Scott's shouting. You fought for the people? Denzel repeated, holding the paper up just enough for the cameras to zoom in. Because this vote record says otherwise. Gasps rippled through the audience. The header on the document was unmistakable, it was a list of recent Senate bills on housing, healthcare, and education. And next to each one, highlighted in red, was Scott's "No" vote. Scott's eyes darted toward the paper like it was a live grenade. That's taken out of context, he stammered. The context, Denzel cut in sharply, is that when kids needed food, you said no. When veterans needed housing, you said no. When working families asked for help, you said no. He placed the sheet flat on the desk and slid it toward Scott, the gesture almost surgical. And now, you want to look America in the eye and call yourself a fighter? The room was dead quiet. Even the senators who had been whispering stopped mid-sentence. Scott's hand hovered over the paper, but he didn't touch it, as if picking it up would make the truth too real. Denzel leaned back in his chair, letting the silence stretch until it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Then he delivered it, 3 words, steady and deliberate. "Read it, Senator." Those words didn't just hang in the air. They owned it. The hearing wasn't about policy anymore. It was about credibility, and at that moment, Scott had none. The audience was leaning forward, the silence so thick you could almost hear the lights buzzing overhead. Tim Scott gripped the edge of the table, his jaw tightening. "You're trying to paint me as someone who ignores reality, Denzel," he shot back, his voice sharpening. "But I've lived the same history as you. I've seen the same pain. The difference is, I don't weaponize it for applause." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Denzel leaned back slowly, eyes locked on Scott, the faintest trace of a smirk forming. "Applause," he repeated, his tone almost whisper quiet, but somehow cutting through the air like glass. "Brother, the only applause I care about is from the ancestors who bled for this country." The room erupted, half with cheers, half with gasps. Tim tried to push back, leaning toward the mic. "I'm talking about moving forward, not dwelling in the past." "Moving forward?" Denzel interrupted sharply, his hand slicing through the air. "Forward doesn't mean forgetting. Forward doesn't mean sweeping graves under the rug so the living can feel comfortable. You call that progress? I call it erasing truth." Scott's lips parted as if to respond, but nothing came out. Cameras zoomed in on his face, flickers of frustration, maybe even doubt. Denzel didn't let up. "You can sit here in a suit, in this air-conditioned room, and talk about moving forward all you want. But outside these walls, there's a kid being told his skin is a threat. There's a mother teaching her son how to survive a traffic stop. That's the America we still live in, and I will never shut up about it, no matter how many people tell me to move on." The crowd was on its feet now, the sound deafening. Tim Scott sat back, eyes narrowed, his fingers drumming against the table. But his silence said more than any rebuttal could. The moderator's voice cracked as she tried to regain control of the room. "Gentlemen, let's..." But Denzel didn't give her the chance. He leaned in, eyes locked on Tim Scott like a hawk closing in on its prey. "You stand here, telling America you've seen the pain," he said, voice low but razor sharp. "If you've seen it, Tim, why are you so quick to minimize it?" Tim straightened in his chair, nostrils flaring. "Because constantly talking about pain keeps us stuck in it," he snapped. "We have to focus on opportunity, on showing young people they can rise above it." "Rise above it?" Denzel barked, his voice suddenly booming. "How do you rise above something when it's still chained to your ankle? You don't rise above a fire by pretending the flames aren't burning your house down, Tim. You put the damn fire out." The crowd roared, a mix of applause and shouted agreements. The moderator's eyes darted to the producers offstage, unsure whether to step in or let the clash play out. Tim leaned forward now, his tone sharpening. "You think you have all the answers because you've played heroes on screen. But this isn't Hollywood, Denzel. This is reality, and reality isn't fixed with speeches." Denzel's smirk returned, colder this time. "You're right," he said, letting the pause hang heavy in the air. "It's not fixed with speeches. It's fixed with courage. The kind of courage it takes to speak truth, even when it costs you something. The kind of courage you used to have before politics got in the way." A loud "oh-itch" shot through the audience like a wave, phones shooting up to record every second. Tim's eyes flashed with something, anger, maybe embarrassment, but he didn't answer. Denzel sat back, folded his arms, and stared him down. "So go ahead, Tim, tell America again how we should move forward. But just remember, history's watching, and so is every kid you're telling to stay quiet." The room went wild. And Tim Scott still didn't speak. The silence from Tim Scott was deafening. Cameras zoomed in on his face, catching every flicker of discomfort. The crowd sensed the shift. Denzel had cornered him, and now the pressure was boiling. "Nothing to say?" Denzel's voice was calm, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. "Because the truth isn't always comfortable, Tim. And the truth is, your silence speaks louder than your speeches." Tim finally leaned forward, his voice tight. I'm not silent. I'm refusing to engage in your theatrics. You're turning real issues into a performance. A performance? Denzel cut in, his tone rising. Let me tell you what a performance is, Tim. A performance is standing on a debate stage talking about unity while voting against bills that would actually create it. A performance is smiling for the cameras in communities you won't fight for when the cameras are gone. The crowd erupted again, cheers and gasps mixing like gasoline and fire. The moderator's voice wavered, "Gentlemen, please," but she was drowned out by the noise. Tim's eyes narrowed. You think you're the only one who cares about these issues? You think I haven't lived through the same struggles? Denzel leaned in so close their mics picked up the quiet menace in his words. I think you forgot what those struggles feel like the moment they stopped affecting you. And that's the problem, Tim. You made it, and instead of holding the door open, you locked it behind you. A murmur swept through the audience, the kind of sound that told you they'd just witnessed a wound being exposed in real time. Tim straightened, but there was no comeback, just the faint twitch of his jaw. Denzel sat back, his eyes never leaving him. I'm not here to win an argument. I'm here to make sure America sees exactly who's fighting for them, and who's just fighting to keep their seat. The lights felt hotter, the air thicker. Every camera in the room knew, this was the clip that would go viral before the night was over. The moderator's hand hovered over her earpiece, clearly getting frantic instructions from the control room. The producers knew what was happening. This wasn't just a heated exchange anymore. This was the kind of TV moment networks dream about. Tim Scott leaned forward, a forced smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. You talk like you've been in my shoes, Denzel, but you haven't. You're an actor. You read lines. I live reality. The crowd reacted instantly, half gasping, half booing. Someone in the front row shouted, "Say it again," but Denzel didn't need them to. His eyes locked on Tim's, and when he spoke, it was with a clarity so sharp it sliced through the noise. You're right, Tim. I am an actor. And you know what actors do? We tell the truth in a way that forces people to feel it. But you, Denzel pointed, slow and deliberate, you've been acting your whole career. Except your role isn't hero or leader. It's apologist. The word hung in the air like a blade. The audience was on its feet now, phones out, recording every second. Tim's composure cracked. That's an insult, and you know it. It's a fact, Denzel snapped. You've got the platform, the power, the ear of the nation, and instead of using it to speak for the voiceless, you use it to keep the powerful comfortable. That's not leadership, Tim. That's betrayal. The moderator tried again. We need to move on. No, Denzel said, without breaking eye contact. America's watching. They deserve to see what it looks like when someone stops hiding behind talking points and gets called out for what they've really done, or haven't done. For the first time, Tim's eyes darted to the crowd. He looked like a man who realized the ground beneath him wasn't solid anymore. Denzel leaned back, a quiet fire still burning in his expression. I'm not here to make you look bad, Tim. I'm here to make sure the truth looks exactly like it should, undeniable. The room fell into a strange silence. Everyone knew the next words could decide who owned the narrative when this clip went viral. The silence in the studio was almost unnatural, no shuffling, no coughs, just the hum of the cameras and the faint whir of the ceiling lights. Millions were watching, but in that moment, it felt like the world had shrunk to two men and one truth hanging in the air. Tim Scott straightened in his chair, gripping the desk as if it could anchor him. You think you're the only one who cares about truth, he said, his voice tighter than before. You think you've cornered the market on morality because you've made speeches on screen? Denzel didn't flinch. His eyes narrowed just enough to signal that whatever came next wasn't rehearsed, it was real, raw, and final. I don't care about speeches, Tim, Denzel said, his voice low but cutting. I care about the people you keep telling to wait while you play politics with their lives. The audience erupted in murmurs, the tension winding tighter. Tim opened his mouth to respond, but Denzel raised a hand, calm, deliberate. The kind of gesture that didn't ask for silence. It demanded it. I've walked into rooms where the truth was the only weapon I had, Denzel continued. And in those rooms, there's one thing I learned: truth doesn't need a bodyguard, it needs a voice. Tim tried to interject, but Denzel leaned in, closing the space between them without breaking eye contact. So here's mine, Denzel said, pausing just long enough for every ear to tune in. If you're afraid of the truth, Tim, maybe it's because it's aiming at you. The words hit like a hammer. Gasps rolled through the crowd. Tim froze, blinking rapidly, his rehearsed composure now fully gone. The moderator didn't even try to move on this time. The cameras zoomed in on Denzel's face, the quiet defiance, the unwavering stare. And in homes across America, people leaned closer to their screens, not wanting to miss a single second. No one applauded. Not yet. It was that kind of silence, the kind that follows a blow you can't recover from. Denzel finally leaned back, folding his hands, as if to say, I'm done. You're not. And in that stillness, the clip was already writing itself into tomorrow's headlines. The thing about truth is, it doesn't care how powerful you are. It doesn't care about your title, your money, or your platform. It will find you. And when it does, you better be ready to stand, or watch yourself fall.